This is video history from the J. Bay Jacobs Library for the History of Obstetrics and Gynecology in America. And on a warm, sunny May afternoon in 1994 in Orlando, Florida, my guest is Dr. William T. Mixson, the 35th president of the college. Bill, delighted we get this chance to talk today.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
I'd really like to start out by asking you where you were born, where you were educated, a little bit about how you grew into your career in obstetrics and gynecology.
I was born in Gainesville, Florida. We moved to Coral Gables, Florida when I was quite young, and I had all of my grade school and high school education in Coral Gables. Went to the University of Florida, and then back to the University of Miami where I got my BS degree, and then to Temple Medical School in Philadelphia, which was during the war. Graduated there in 1948. Spent 2 years at Philadelphia General doing a rotating internship. I had planned at that point to be a family physician.
But you saw the light.
Well, I saw that I couldn't do everything well. And I went through various phases because I liked everything. But J. Robert Wilson had come to Temple in my junior year, and I found myself so well prepared that I did obstetrics extremely well as an intern. So that is what really stimulated my interest. And I was fortunate then to get a residency back at Temple under Dr. Wilson.
What year did you finish the residency then?
1953.
And did you return then to Florida?
Yes, went back to Coral Gables, practiced obstetrics and gynecology in Coral Gables, and gave up the OB part about 1972.
You certainly have had a long and indeed distinguished career contributing to the college. How did you get involved in college activities? The year you started practice was not much after the college started.
Well, my first memory of the college was when the academy had a meeting in Cincinnati, and Dr. Wilson took me as a senior resident to the meeting. And I was quite awed by sitting at the same table with Dr. Norman Miller. I became involved in the college, I guess, about 1970. John McCain, with whom I had worked at the South Atlantic Association, said that they had considered me for secretary-treasurer of the district. And
you asked what that was.
Well, I didn't ask. I should have. He said that what they had in mind was that I would move up to vice chairman and then chairman. And they would alternate between somebody in academics and somebody in private practice. So I thought about it, and I said, well, I think I could give 3 years to the college. That would be fine. I did not know each of those was 3 years, and did not know that as district chairman, I would be sitting on the board. That was an enlightening experience.
So you started that in, 1970? 1970, and actually progressed through all of those ranks.
Right.
Gradually learning the increased responsibility that went with it.
Right. But it was fun. I enjoyed it. And, as I got more involved, spent more time. Of course, as a district chairman, we didn't have any staff support, so that we did all the work. And I found that's where my afternoons off went and where my weekends went. And so it involved a lot of time, but that became my hobby.
What were the political issues in the days that you were district chairman?
The political issues. Well, I think the most overriding thing was professional liability. Would you call that a political issue?
Certainly, yes.
And in Florida, we had probably the worst experience in the country. It still probably is worse in Dade County now than most any place. It cost $150,000 for $1 million coverage for OB, and $50,000 for a gynecologist to have $250,000. So it's still pretty bad there. But the college at that time had the attitude that these were problems that had to be solved on the state level, and very little interest was being devoted toward professional liability. And that was, I guess, one of my first activities was to get the college to recognize that it was a national problem. And Irv Nichols, who was director of practice, kind of fought that. But eventually, I was able to convince the whole board. And once Irv was convinced, man, he became a fire.
Side, yes.
He was really very effective. And he and Elroy Raines, an attorney who was working with the college at that time, came back with 3 different options of ways that the college could deal with professional liability. Of course, each had a different budget item decided, and I think we picked the middle one as far as the cost was concerned. But at that time, the college became very involved in professional liability, and we preceded any organization with that activity. Just as a extension of that, later, I think, when I was president, I conferred with you about the AMA, which at that time still thought it was a local issue.
That's right.
And with your help, our delegate introduced a resolution at the AMA, very simple, saying that the AMA should recognize that this is a problem that should be dealt with at the national level. And the House of Delegates embraced that enthusiastically. And as I recall, Dr. Salmons told you to stop trying to run his organization.
At least once, yes.
But as a result of that, the AMA did a 180-degree turn. And, of course, they've been very involved in professional liability since that time.
Well, that certainly wasn't the only thing that you started for the college, but during what went on with you during the time you finished as district chairman, were elected president, when I went on in the sense of how you were involved with the college?
Well, I went from district chairman to secretary for 3 years, and then president-elect.
National secretary.
National secretary, yeah. Well, one of the things that happened when I was district chairman related to the council of district chairmen, and it may be of some interest how that got started. In the early days, the district chairman didn't really much want to spend time with the college. And so by default, the executive committee kind of took over the function of the responsibility. But then with time, other district chairmen did want to be involved. So what was happening was the executive committee was meeting the night before the board and deciding all the issues, so that when the district chairman met as the full board, all the issues were decided. Well, that kind of rankled some of them, particularly John McCain. And as this interview may indicate, John McCain I was quite fond of. But John McCain and George Ryan and Goldfarb and some others really were getting increasingly exercised. But they moved on, and it became my responsibility to be the point man to attack the executive committee. Attack is not quite the word, but it was not a real friendly conference that we had. But as a result of that, the board began to meet 4 times a year. The idea was that the board meeting 4 times a year could take care of the business, and the executive committee was not necessary except for emergencies. And that
the world was getting more the world of medicine was getting more complicated too.
Yeah, it needed more involvement, and it's worked well and has continued to do that. The Council of District Chairmen was the organization that came from the district chairman meeting the night before the board meeting to also decide what should happen to some of the issues, and they eventually became an official organ of the college. And now they still meet separately, but they deal with district issues rather than the agenda of the board.
I think we've struck a happy balance between the
seems to be working well.
District chairman and the elected officers. In the year that you were president, around the time you were president, what things would you remark on as accomplishments? Because I can think of some if you can't.
Well, I think the thing that probably gets the least play, but in my view is the most important, was the effort toward underserved women. And the way that came about was that when I was president-elect, I chose to interview as many department chairmen as I could, because I figured that would be a good input of information for me as a clinician. And I was able to have one-on-one with 55 of the chairmen prior to the time I became president. Two of the things that I asked them about that the college could do and have a better activity, one was research and one was indigent care. Those were the two issues I didn't get any significant input. I got good input for every other issue I asked about. So that was a little frustrating. When I was president, I started having routine executive sessions. One was to make executive sessions less threatening to staff, which they always are. But my main thought was that it would give an informal place for the board to talk.
You're real to and fro.
In a standard board meeting, there are always a lot of auditors and other people around, and a lot of staff around, and it kind of inhibits a free flow. Not always, but a lot of times. And so this particular executive session, I brought up my frustration at not having found a way for the college to be involved in indigent care. Well, the chemistry just exploded. It was just fabulous. I can't remember if you were there or if it was without staff at that point. But Ezra Davidson and Luella Klein and Dick Schwartz, Bob Smith, Harry Jonas, just all kinds of people with all kinds of skills and background jumped into it. And by the time we finished that session, we had pretty much outlined how the college would address what became known as underserved women and adolescent care, because that was part of that problem. I think that probably is the most important thing.
I remember, too, one day that you and I sat down in Vie de France restaurant at 600 Maryland Avenue, and you wondered why we couldn't have an abstract journal because the survey didn't seem to be doing a good job, and you thought we could probably do a better job, and I wasn't so sure that you were right, but you were, I guess.
Well, it's turned out well, and I appreciate your giving me the credit. I think I did have that idea, but of course the thing came about because you took the initiative and rode with it.
Well, but it was a good success, and I clearly remember that the idea came from you. What other things have stuck with you from those several years?
On the research end, again, through your efforts, I had the feeling that we did need to stimulate more research on what was causing labor, because if you knew what caused it, you probably could stop it, and that would get at the problem of prematurity. And through your effort and Dwayne Alexander at NICHD, planning conferences were set up with Paul McDonald from Texas leading those planning conferences, and eventually a weekend conference from experts all over the world came to Washington and met on that issue. I sat in. It was interesting. I could hardly understand what they were talking about because they were at cellular metabolism levels and all kinds of basic science. I don't know if anything's ever really come of it, but I think possibly there was some spread out from that.
I think it's come in the sense that Paul McDonald and others who were with you have delved a lot into molecular biology relating to it, and we're continuing to hear things about it. It's like many things in OBGYN, it's not a simple question. But,
I think everybody was hoping that funding would improve greatly after that. I don't know how much it did because the government funds for basic research were being fairly limited.
Other things that strike your notice over those years?
Well, another thing that happened as I was district chairman is the District Service Award. That came about because Lester Wilson, who was district chairman preceding me, it was apparent that he had given a lot of time and effort, worked hard for the district, but that he was not going to go any further than that. So he would not have any recognition. At the same time, the Air Forces were frustrated because they had been trying to get Kermit Krantz nominated for the Distinguished Service Award at the college, and they were frustrated because the answer was, well, he did all his work at the district level, and therefore he would not be honored. So that was the nucleus for creating the District Service Award, which was to honor people who had done a great deal of service for their districts. And but we wanted it recognized at the national level. And initially, they were introduced at the business meeting. Subsequently, they were introduced at the convocation, and finally, they were robed and put on the stage. So, I think at least it's an effort by the college to recognize a lot of effort made at the district level. And of course, some of those people end up getting Distinguished Service Awards too.
And I certainly have always admired you because when you had an idea, you hung on to it until something happened to it. And
even if it was wrong.
Well, I don't think there were wrong ones. I remember well the idea of getting awards for the best teachers across the country. And, well, we could never figure out a way to do it nationally at the college level. You finally provoked both APCO and CREOG into setting up programs that reward people.
And the junior fellows have an award somewhat of that type. So it has happened in a different kind of way without the college. I thought it would be great for the college as the major organization of our specialty to recognize a teacher, but it's being done.
At least
anyway.
We found a way to get it done.
The John McCain Fellowship is another one of my ideas, sort of a takeoff on a idea of Alvin Goldfarb's. And the John McCain Fellow, that was also developed primarily with Herb Nichols' help. And it's a individual selected from a district that comes to Washington for a month. The expenses are paid by the district. And that individual goes with the government relations staff around to the various congressional offices and bureaus as well. Staff found it was an advantage because it gave them an entree to get over there. And then I think we started off with 3 a year. And after a couple of years, the other districts started screaming, well, why can't we do that? So we said, well, they should be able to. And the staff could only handle 2 or 3 a year, so the various districts have been shuffling that around. Now, they wanted to name it. We named it John McCain Fellowship after John McCain, who had then passed away and had been so active in the government relations kind of thing. They wanted to name it after somebody in their own district, and we prevailed upon it being national because John's activity was national. It wasn't a district activity. As a spinoff of that, it became apparent to me after the first 2 or 3 had been there that was just an ineffective way to get enough fellows educated in the legislative process. And so the legislative workshop came about as a way of getting a whole lot of people. And so the workshop has continued yearly and I think has been really very productive. And we include state as well as national.
Bill, it's been great to talk with you today. And as I said, I think if I remember you for anything, it's for not only having good ideas, but sticking with them until something came of them. And I think we see in the structure of the college today a lot of ideas that started off with you. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure.